All right, folks, I don't know where to begin, but we might be going through the singular greatest example of political corruption in modern American history, which is saying something because it involves Donald Trump and we know his history. But in a nutshell, it sure seems that the Trump administration is attempting a quid pro quo to benefit corrupt Democratic Mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, in exchange for his cooperation with Trump's immigration policies. And this has resulted in the resignations, the public, sensational resignations of multiple high ranking conservative prosecutors. So much to unpack. And even the governor of New York is on the record as saying she is considering firing Mayor Adams as a consequence of this. This is all over the place. But we need a legal mind to help unpack it because I'm just a guy with a political science degree. So I brought in my friend and yours, Pisco of Pisco's Hour, my co-host on Live and Learn, to unpack this. Bro, where to begin? Let's just start with this. In a nutshell, what is going on? Can you recount the case, briefly, the case against Mayor Adams and what the Trump administration attempted to do and how they got busted?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. This is really explosive stuff. It's worse than Watergate. It's the third Friday night massacre we've had in like 3 weeks, and it is absolutely explosive stuff of evidence of corruption, really, of this administration. So if you recall, the Eric Adams, the mayor of the city, the current sitting mayor of the city, was indicted for corruption, for bribery, for taking money from Turkish officials in exchange for official acts, as well as messing around with evidence. The evidence appeared to be quite strong. There were text messages on the record. No one seems to contest that he is guilty in terms of like the actual members of the Department of Justice. And we just received word that earlier this week that the charges were being dropped, but we didn't yet have were the statements on the record from the line prosecutors and the prosecutor overseeing the matter, who essentially said and reaffirmed that there is no substantial basis to drop the charges based on his actual guilt or innocence. There's zero evidence of any procedural improprieties in what's going on in terms of the investigation being run corruptly or anything like that, that those facts are not even contested by the Trump administration. And the explicit reasons for dropping this case is for a political quid pro quo. In other words, to get Mayor Adams's cooperation with the administration in exchange for dropping the case. And none of this is contested whatsoever. It's blatant in your face, and it is disgusting.
So we're gonna look at some of the again, these stunning, high-profile, earth-shaking resignation letters that have dropped. I mean, there was one an hour before you and I sat down to record this, which is also making waves. But I also people like clips, people like visuals. I want you to see, as further evidence of this, Mayor Adams sitting with Donald Trump's border czar Tom Homan on Fox and Friends
today.
And they acknowledge that there is an agreement between Adams and Homan with respect to immigration policy that is very relevant to what we're talking about. Here's the clip.
If he doesn't come through,
you're up early anyway.
if he doesn't come through, I'll be back in New York City, and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, "Where the hell is the agreement we came to?" So,
I want ICE to deliver, and I want ICE to deliver. We're going to deliver for the safety.
So there you go.
Dog walking him, completely dog walking him like the Trump administration's own stooge. It is insane, the level of corruption. They're on Fox News flagrant about it and telling you, hey, there's an agreement we're having, and if he doesn't keep to his agreement, we're going to come back. Josiah, we really need to get into the nuts and bolts of what exactly was agreed to between the parties. But just so the audience is aware, they have dismissed the charges, and you'll see in this letter to Pam Bondi by the acting U.S. attorney, a Trump appointee, by the way, who's only been on the job 3 weeks. She says that they're trying to dismiss this case without prejudice, to have the sword of Damocles hanging over Mayor Adams's head the entire time. That's one of the reasons why the Trump administration is not willing to go on the record and say the evidence is weak, is because they want no prejudicial statements to a potential charge in the future if they bring it back when Mayor Adams is, not listening to them.
Right,
so
exactly.
It's pure corruption.
It's leverage to employ against the Democratic mayor. Exactly. So that I see that here in the letter, which is also annotated by the New York Times. Emil Bove, Trump's former defense lawyer and now a top Justice Department official, ordered Sassoon, again, a conservative Trump appointee. She's a member of the Federalist Society.
Scalia clerk.
She clerked for the late conservative Justice Antonin Scalia of the Supreme Court. She also recently wrote a scathing condemnation of former President Biden with respect to some of the pardons. So again, she is a partisan conservative. And even she says this is a bridge too far. So when you're talking about getting into the nuts and bolts of it, doesn't the letter indicate, I mean, she spells out explicitly that there is a quid pro quo here, and that even that her superiors attempted to take action to conceal evidence of it. Wasn't that he ordered her to, he seized the notes and documentation about this as well? Can we talk about, again, the evidence of the quid pro quo in the letter and their actions to conceal evidence of the quid pro quo?
Yeah, so first off, it's footnote 1 that you're looking for. This is the footnote in which it's described that there was a conversation between the prosecution team from the Southern District of New York, and the Southern District of New York has a reputation for being independent. It's known as the Sovereign District of New York. They're really trying to be independent from the main justice and also obviously from the President of the United States, but this president doesn't care. And so in that footnote, you can see that there was a meeting between the SDNY prosecutors from the Deputy Attorney General and with Mayor Adams's counsel, where there's open discussions about what's going on in terms of helping out on immigration in exchange for leniency and dropping the charges. That it's not even contested in the conversation. So that's one piece of evidence. Then it's noted and it's not even contested.
It's in the same footnote I see here about the notes. Mr. Bove admonished a member of my team who took notes during the meeting and directed the collection of those notes at the meeting's conclusion.
Yeah, no, it's right there. And so that's one piece of it. It's like, okay, well, it's just he said, she said, right? No. There was also another conversation, which is attested to, where the comparison is made directly to the transfer of a prisoner, Brittany Griner, for the Merchant of Death, Victor Bout, which there was a lot of controversy about. But that's literally a quid pro quo that was used as an example to cite for this particular deal made with Eric Adams, comparing it to a trade of prisoners between the Russian Federation and America, a literal quid pro quo. And then finally, they openly released the letter where they say it's a quid pro quo, where they literally say, of the two reasons, one is obviously pretextual. It's like, oh, the former SDNY head has like a website. It's so obviously pretextual. I'm not even going to bore you about how much of a lie that rationale is. And the real reason, which they literally list, they put it out in a public letter that they've released to the public. It says to help us with immigration. And so there is literally zero contestation that this is a political quid pro quo. It is worse than anything Richard Nixon has ever done. It is one of the most corrupt actions in the history of the country. The Department of Justice is being turned into a political tool for the Trump MAGA regime.
Yeah, so I want to, I pulled up this letter from Emil Bove because I believe there are actually two letters. And this one is, the most recent one is Emil Bove, who was cited in the footnote, who directed the collection of the notes that were taken, again, to try to conceal evidence of the quid pro quo, acknowledging in his acceptance letter of Sassoon's resignation, once again reiterating that this is an attempt to secure his cooperation with Donald Trump's broader political aspirations. So again, they're not concealing it at all. Let me ask you something, though. Why not conceal it? So I'm not an attorney. You're an attorney. My understanding is that when it comes to negotiating plea deals or, engaging in prosecutorial discretion, can't they take certain things like this into consideration? Is this illegal? Is this legal but corrupt? Like, can we parse through this? Because I've heard some people say, listen, prosecutors, they engage in, that's what a plea deal is, quid pro quo, right? Like what makes this illegal or corrupt or legal but corrupt? Where are we?
Yeah. So what makes this corrupt and, in my opinion, illegal, I think a bedrock foundation of this country is equal administration of justice. That's why it was so offensive, this ruling, the immunity decision from the Supreme Court earlier, which essentially said the president has this wide sweeping immunity while he's in office, and even after he's in office. So I do think it's illegal. And the reason is it's based on a political motivation. It would be like saying, I'm not going to charge someone if they're a Republican, or I'm not going to charge someone if you vote for me. Imagine that we were negotiating and I was going to say, I'm going to not indict you if you decide to vote with the boss this weekend in the vote that's coming up.
Let's put a fine point on it for as a layman and somebody, who many of our audience, much of my audience are laymen as well. I imagine not all of them are attorneys, but okay. So you're a prosecutor, you're negotiating a plea deal with me or discussion of dropping the charges. What are the sorts of things you can extract from me as concessions or conditions of you either dropping charges, reducing charges? What are things you can rightfully extract from me?
Yeah, cooperation in another investigation, potentially maybe some support for having a where you're going out and you're having I forget the exact terminology, but you stated out loud that you're guilty, and so there's a public sort of statement of it where you're servicing the ends of justice. For example, let's say it's a very complicated case. Maybe you take the plea on some of the high level cases, and they agree to wipe away the rest of the cases or all the rest of the charges. So there are things related to your particular case, things related to the interest of justice in the long term, serving the public need. So all of those things are fair game, but what's not acceptable is to do things for political purposes. One, I think it probably violates the First Amendment if you're making preferences based on political allegiance.
So, for example, we couldn't have a deal where you agree to drop the charges if I, as a private citizen, agree to vote Republican for the rest of my life.
Right.
You couldn't extract that sort of concession from me. If
Right, of course that would be improper.
If I'm a politician, you couldn't extract the concession from me that I will vote for, let's say I'm a congressman or a senator, that I will vote for Republican bills as a condition of you dropping charges. There are clear limitations to what you, a prosecutor, can extract in exchange for dropping charges.
100%. In the Justice Manual, in the Rules of Professional Conduct, the criminal prosecution is considered one of the most powerful tools of the government. It's the ability to lock you away forever. And absolutely, there are guiding principles in the Due Process Clause, in the First Amendment, in the principles of justice themselves that prevent this kind of quid pro quo. It would turn our country into Russia or Hungary. I mean, think about everyone talking about corruption in Ukraine. One of the major sources of corruption for Ukraine for so many years was the Prosecutor General's office being used like this, being used as a tool for political expedience and to go after the enemies of the regime. That's why Navalny was in prison in Russia. This is one of the death knells of a democracy. And so we cannot let this go by and just ignore it. This is one of the most corrupt things ever. And what you have right now, Josiah, which we should point our audience to, is a standoff. There are tons of people now being about to be fired. And why don't you pull up that tweet?
Yeah, I'll pull that up in just a second. I just want to put a fine point on this. So again, as far as I'm aware, this is from the headline from the most recent New York Times article. Manhattan's U.S. District Attorney resigned Thursday rather than obey an order from top Justice Department officials. Then, when Justice Department transferred the case to the Public Integrity Section in Washington, which oversees corruption prosecutions, 2 men who led that unit also resigned. So back-to-back resignations. And then several hours later, 3 other lawyers in the unit also resigned. And then we will get to the rest of the Public Integrity Unit because that's a really powerful point to close off of. But then on top of that, there was, again, within the past hour, a major bombshell of a letter from Hagen Scotton, who is a line prosecutor, and he gave a very short letter, but I just want to end with this one, which is, there's a tradition in public service of resigning in a last-ditch effort to head off a serious mistake. Some will view the mistake you are committing here in light of their generally negative views of the new administration. I do not share those views. I can even understand how a chief executive whose background is in business and politics might see the complicated dismissal with leverage as a good, if distasteful, deal. But any assistant U.S. attorney would know that our laws and traditions do not allow using the prosecutorial power to influence other citizens, much less elected officials, in this way. If no other lawyer within earshot of the president is willing to give him that advice, then I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion. But it was never going to be me. Please consider this my resignation. It's been an honor to serve as a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. Holy shit, Pisco. Holy shit. I mean, like, talk about, again, this is a guy who, and of course, this doesn't matter, Pisco, because conservatives that we engage with, conservatives that we see online, they're just going to say rhino, 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 deep state plant, deep state plant. But here you have a guy in his scathing resignation letter, even in my opinion, ridiculously giving Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt by saying, he has a background in business. Maybe, like, he's not going out of his way to torch the president, right? He's bending over backwards to not make this a partisan issue, but recognizes that there is blatant corruption within this order. The last thing, do you have anything to say on that before we turn to the
I totally
final
agree.
tweet?
Those words are incredibly scary, because it shows you how deep of a hole our country is in terms of the Justice Department. And it really is, it should be addressed to the President of the United States, because this is all his work. He should be removed for this. He should be removed for 1,000 other things, but this especially. Now we're in deep shit.
Yeah. So again, just to round it out, because you mentioned this just a few seconds ago, according to Barb McQuaid, a former U.S. attorney who is an MSNBC analyst, she broke the news that DOJ leadership has put all public integrity section lawyers into a room with 1 hour to decide who will dismiss at the Adams indictment, or else all will be fired. Okay. So after these back-to-back resignations, it sounds like they just said, okay, we'll put all of you in a room together, find somebody who is enough of a simp or enough of a coward to sign this order, or you're all shit can. Let me ask you this. If they follow through with this, could there be grounds for suit from these attorneys if they're discharged in this way? Would you be surprised if they attempt to sue, if they're all discharged as a consequence of this, or no?
I wouldn't find it surprising if they sued. I happen to think that we're in a dangerous situation with respect to the court's willingness to hear that the president's authority to remove people unilaterally for any reason is absolute. And so I'm not very confident that this Supreme Court is going to uphold these kinds of lawsuits, but I think that they will sue, just like FBI agents recently have sued for similar types of dismissals.
So this could be unfortunately a true win-win situation for the Trump administration, in that they purge these people and then potentially provoke a question about the president effectively making every federal employee an at-will employee, and get that question before a sympathetic Supreme Court. So we are truly in perilous times. Last thing, the very last thing, is this, which is Governor Kathy Hochul, according to the charter of New York City, has the power under certain circumstances to fire Mayor Adams. And again, we'll probably do a separate video about this. We really don't have time to go through the whole thing, but she was asked about this. Governor Hochul was during MSNBC interview with Rachel Maddow, and she says she's considering it. This was put in front of her. She doesn't want to rush the process, but she is considering the implications of these recent developments and looking at her options. Do you think that Governor Hochul should fire Mayor Adams?
Yes, absolutely. Governor Hochul should remove Mayor Adams. And if Governor Hochul does not do so, I will not be supporting her in the primary for governor in the next Democratic primary. It's important and vital for the interest of this state and this city that Mayor Adams be removed as soon as possible.
Yeah. So again, so much to unpack. We could have probably done a video on every single piece of this, like each and every letter, the clip we saw from Fox and Friends with Mayor Adams, this interview with Governor Hochul. And I'm sure we'll be covering this extensively. But how do you predict this will go? Do you expect that the Trump administration will back down, or do you think that they will find somebody who will eventually carry out this order?
They'll find someone to be a coward. They'll find someone to lie. And so I don't expect them to back down. This administration wants to centralize power, and they are corrupt. And so they'll find someone to do their dirty dealings. And the question is, what are you going to do about it? And the question is, what are Democrats going to do?
That actually tees up the very final question, which is this. Let's flash forward to 2026. We get a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives. Very unlikely that we get a Democratic majority in the Senate, but I suppose it's possible. Would you impeach Donald Trump over this?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. All right, Pisco, I appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Pisco's Hour on YouTube.
All right, and also every Wednesday with Live and Learn with Econoboy, Hutch, and myself. But I appreciate this. I know you'll be on this like a hawk, and people can go to Pisco's Hour for more substantive, in-depth legal analysis of the situation, because he streamed about it last night, and I'm sure he's going to be talking about it again tonight as well. But thank you so much.
You better believe it. Thanks, man.